which is my way of segueing seamlessly into. You speak of renunciation, which is because I know I'm, very, very, very lapsed Catholic, but I know that the number of Catholic nuns around the world, apart from places like Poland, where my family's from, are reducing significantly because a lot of Westerners can't actually give up all the trappings of life. But particularly celibacy, I think, is probably quite challenging for a lot of people. Is it really, and within the sort of,
Okay, yeah, I'm
or
listening.
maybe not.
I'm listening.
Maybe not. I was going to go down. I won't. So within the Christian churches, there's sort of a movement to include women, to have married clergy. Do you think that that's something that, yes, will happen?
I think it's a good thing.
You think it's a good thing?
Oh, yeah.
So celibacy is not necessary for...
I mean, even in Tibet, some of the greatest lamas were married.
Oh, okay, I didn't
and
know
had
that.
many wonderful children, many of whom themselves became great lamas.
Right.
I mean, celibacy is an excellent thing, but it's not anything to do with being spiritual.
Oh,
I mean, you can be highly spiritual and also at the same time be a family person.
Right, so there's not that division that we have in...
No. And this is why I think also in the Catholic Church, I mean, as in the Anglican Church, they definitely should allow the priests who are dealing all the time with lay people. It's not like monks who are living in a monastery. Yeah, of course they have to be celibate. But priests who are dealing the whole time with their congregation of lay people, it makes a lot of sense if they're married, because then they know the problems.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they've got families, so they can sympathize. It's not just theoretical. So, I mean, it makes sense to, if they want to be celibate, they can be celibate.
Yeah.
But if they want to get married, why not?
So it's not, because often it's seen that women are depicted as the typical sort of telling of the stories that women are sort of blamed for men's desires.
Of course.
And seen as...
We're 8 times more lustful than men. Did you know?
Yeah, I did actually. Which again segues me seamlessly into speaking as a gay person. There's nowhere I feel, because as a very spiritually inclined person, it's hard for me to find a place where I can lay down my burden and be unconditionally accepted. And I know, like a lot of gay people wonder. The Dalai Lama seems to certainly have a softer sort of approach to that than many of the other. The Catholic Church, harking back to my one, is very hardline about it. But Francis is a bit better. But what is the position at the moment for the likes of me and my LGBTQI brethren and sistren?
Well, as I said. In Christianity, when they talk about sin, in most people's minds, sin is synonymous with sex. Whereas in Buddhism, in the ethical code, when they think about non-virtuous actions, they're mostly thinking about harming and killing. And that is the big no-no. That we should have be non-violent and not harm. And of course, for monks and nuns, obviously they're expected to be celibate, but for the lay community, it's very laissez-faire. I mean, whatever happens to be the social context of that place. Then, so as I said, in Tibet they had polyandry.
Yeah, right.
And that was acceptable because socially it worked. And so. I don't think that sex is a big deal in Buddhism.
They're not as uptight about it.
They don't care.
Right.
They really don't care. As long as you're not hurting anybody. The main point is not to harm, not to cause any hurt, either to yourself or to others. And so therefore you should be sexually responsible. Right. And not use your sexuality to exploit others or to create any problems. And as long as you don't do that, I mean, I know in America there are a number of Dharma centers which are run by gay couples.
Right.
And the Lama is perfectly happy with that. He doesn't even think about it, I don't think.
Because I'm also wondering about the sort of effect that the West is having since Buddhism has sort of spread, much more globally, but particularly now there's the intersection with the West, and it seems that there's a lot of influence of psychotherapy. Is that a meeting of the minds? Is that a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, where Buddhism is very adaptable. Wherever it goes, it takes on the culture of the country it has gone to, which is why you have Thai Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. Wherever it goes, it takes on a lot of the colouring and the emphasis of that culture. And at the same time, it's like, if you think of the Dharma, if you think of Buddhism as being like the liquid, then it goes in this shape when it's in this cup, and then it goes in that shape when it's in that glass, and it just changes its outer form, but the inner essence stays the same. It's still water. So when it comes to the West, of course, it is meeting already with a very ancient culture, and as well as, new cultural trends. So, of course, it's beginning, and everything is speeded up. Usually it would take centuries in the country it went to. Now it's very quickly. And I think it's developed a number of things. One is the courtship, if not the marriage yet, but the courtship of psychiatry and meditation. Because they're both interested in the mind. I mean, many, like Jack Cornfield, and others are psychotherapists. One time I was in Australia and I asked the audience, who here is in to some kind of field of psychotherapy or psychiatry? And probably about 60% put their hand up.
Should we do that now? Put your hands up if you... reasonable showing. Yeah,
there's quite a lot.
Yeah.
And because
they do feel compatible.
Because people are interested in the mind, and also because they are recognizing there are certain aspects of the mind which cannot be uncovered by psychotherapy. And at the same time, there are sometimes aspects of our psyche which cannot be healed by meditation. In fact, meditation might be bad for you.
Really?
Of course.
In what circumstances?
Well, for example, if you had a very abusive or traumatic experiences, when you sit and meditate, that will all come up. And people can't deal with it. They have no tools to deal with it,
Yeah.
So this is why Jack is saying that first maybe they should do some psychotherapy first.
Yeah.
Get their mind in balance so that they are able to deal with, fear is a very common thing. Many people say when they start to meditate, this fear, this unbearable fear arises. And for some of them, it's very obvious that it would be very helpful for them to do some psychotherapy first, to find out where is one of the least obvious sources of this fear, which might come from some repressed memories or whatever.
Can karma play into that as well, do you think? Or?
Well, it's all karma.
Right.
I mean, if you find the right psychiatrist, then lucky you.
But do you think... but... yeah. Who's less crazy than you are?
The other aspects of that Buddhism, which is changing in the West, is the much more now breaking down of the patriarchy.
Yes.
There are many female teachers, and many centers are run by women now. And there are some very powerful female teachers, and many books on the Dharma which are written by the women. And so this is a whole new departure.
Yeah.
And also I would say the interest in, we started with that, how to bring the teachings on loving kindness and compassion into the world to deal with the problems of the world. And how to develop that inner stance which is not based on the sense of I'm right, therefore you're wrong, but is compassionate to all sides. Even while they are out there, and mindfulness is the key to that, that one should, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh, who is this great Vietnamese master, during the Vietnamese War, he started something like the School for Social Service or something like that. Anyway, he got all these young people, and they had, based on their mindfulness and their practice, they then had to go out into the war zones and help whichever side needed help. They were not to discriminate. So they got flack from both sides, of course, and in the end he got thrown out because both sides assumed he must be on the other side. But actually they were neutral, and they were just there. Whoever needed help, they were there to help them.
Well, because I'm going to take it to a slightly heavy place now, because, and I hope you'll be patient with me on this one, but sometimes conflicts are not just like, oh, I'm having problems with a co-worker. They can be really extreme, and this is speaking from my very personal history. As anyone who's read my book will know, my father was an assassin in a top-secret counterintelligence unit with the Polish underground. And his job was to execute Polish collaborators who were giving information to the Gestapo and who were telling the Gestapo where Jewish people were hiding. Now, my entire family was hiding Jewish people. Poland was the only country where the penalty for hiding a Jew was the death sentence, and they were risking torture. So very brave people and altruistic in many ways. But I asked my father if I can just tell one story.
Yeah, please,
and this for me is sort of the pacifist's dilemma, which is that I might not strike back to protect my own life, but if it was a child, I honestly don't know what I'd do. And my father was literally in that situation. He saw a Jewish child who'd come out from the ghetto, and he'd made his way all the way through the barbed wire, and then he was getting back, and the German soldier waited till the kid was nearly through, picked him up by the scruff of the neck, and then laughing, shot the child through the head. And I said to my father, what did you do? And he said, what could I do? I stood there like a bloody idiot, and I thought to myself, if there's any God, how could he let that happen? And then he said, but a little while later, the situation was reversed, and he said, I had the gun, and I saw the German soldier. And I said, what did you do? And he said, I shot him. And I feel so torn, because part of me is going, the Buddhists don't harm, and the other part, to be honest, is going, one less psychopath who's going to kill. Is killing to stop more killing? Is there ever a justification for killing?
Oh, well, of course, there's a very famous Mahayana story, which we can all sigh over all the nuns ago. Of a big boat with 500 people on it, and then there was a kind of psychopath on it who was going to kill all the people, and so then the captain decided to kill him and take the karma of it. Yeah. But his motivation was to save the other 500, though I can't think why the other 500 couldn't just sat on the man and shot him. But anyway, the moral of the story, if it's considered moral, is that in extreme circumstances, in order to save the lives of many, you might have to sacrifice one.
Right.
But the point is, from a Buddhist perspective, the point is also the state of mind you were in when you killed that person.
Right.
It wasn't compassion, probably, it was anger and loathing. And in that is why your father felt guilty, because he knew that motivated by compassion, but not just by compassion, by hatred. And as the Buddha said, you know, hatred never ceases by hatred. Hatred only ceases by non-hatred. Yeah. So, you know, then they're going to go back and say, oh, look, this guy killed this guy, then we've got to kill them. And, you know, it's endless, isn't it?
Well, I think there was compassion certainly, because he said the reason he did it, he couldn't stand what was happening to the Jews and the Jewish children.
Yeah, but that was only one side of it. And the other side, that compassion for the Jews, which was very, very incredibly commendable, nonetheless was counterbalanced by his hatred of people who were harming the Jews.
No, because he stayed with German women after the war to protect them from POWs. So he was pretty even-handed in his position. I suppose it just feels very present for me because it's my dad, you know, and it's not that far away, and it's also. I mean, I'm giving this example because it's one that's very personal and I know it, and it's very charged for me. But really, I mean, it's going on in Syria. We've got Manus Island. And this is the other thing I wanted to ask you about is